I'm grateful you joined tonight. Your nervous system has been working harder than most people's all day, taking in more, feeling more, processing more than the world around you even notices. You'll discover why your sensitive brain needs something different from sleep, and understand why rest, for you, is a form of healing. Welcome to Sleepy Science Night. Wherever you are right now, perhaps with the lights already low and the sounds of the day finally fading, allow yourself this particular stillness. You've earned it in ways others may not fully understand. We'll journey through 100 psychology facts about the highly sensitive mind. From the neuroscience of a nervous system built for depth, to the quiet science of emotional repair, to why sleep, for you, is never just sleep. This thoughtful journey through the sensitive mind builds bridges between searching souls who have always needed a gentler world. A soft subscribe, like, or a quiet share creates a pathway for more sensitive hearts to discover and brings us closer to protect this sanctuary. Your presence here means everything to us. One sleepy soul at a time. Let yourself settle completely here. Feel your jaw unclench, your shoulders drop, your breath deepen and slow. You don't need to process anything more tonight. Sense that gentle heaviness settling through you, like a room after the last guest has gone. Still, unheld, and finally, only yours. Let your body rest in its own quiet. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're resting where the quietest rooms hold the most feeling. Let your mind soften into the depth it was always built for. And now we begin. Between 15 and 20% of all people on Earth are born with a nervous system that processes the world more deeply than others. This is not a disorder. It is not anxiety. It is not shyness, though it is sometimes confused for these things. It is a personality trait identified by psychologist Elaine Aron in the 1990s and studied in growing depth ever since. Researchers call it sensory processing sensitivity, and the people who carry it are often called highly sensitive people. Their brains take in more information from the environment, process it more thoroughly, and respond to it more intensely. In a world built around speed and noise, carrying this trait can feel like a burden. But the science tells a different story. And tonight, that story begins here, with you, exactly as you are. The trait of high sensitivity is not a modern invention. It has existed throughout human history and in hundreds of other species. Researchers studying animal behavior have found sensitivity variations in fish, birds, primates, and many other creatures. In evolutionary terms, having some members of a group who notice subtle dangers, who process social cues deeply, and who reflect before acting gave early human communities an advantage. These individuals were the observers, the planners, the ones who sensed a change in the wind before others looked up. Modern science suggests this trait persisted because it served a purpose. It was never a flaw in the design. It was part of the design itself, a deliberate variation in how some nervous systems are wired to meet the world. The acronym DOES describes the 4 core characteristics of sensory processing sensitivity. D stands for depth of processing. O stands for overstimulation. E stands for emotional reactivity and empathy. S stands for sensitivity to subtle stimuli. Each of these four qualities is connected to the others. Because a highly sensitive brain processes information more deeply, it naturally encounters more of that information. Because it encounters more, it reaches saturation faster. Because it reaches saturation faster, the emotional response becomes more intense. And because the emotional response is more intense, even small stimuli can set the entire system into motion. Understanding these four qualities together helps explain why rest, for a sensitive person, is not one option among many. It is restoration. The highly sensitive brain does not simply receive more input. It processes that input through more layers. Brain imaging studies have shown that when highly sensitive people observe images, especially images related to other people's emotions, regions associated with awareness, empathy, and integration of complex information show significantly more activity than in non-sensitive individuals. This includes the insula, a region involved in the sense of the body's internal state. It is worth noting that some of the neural systems involved in empathy, including what has been described as mirror neuron activity, are still being actively studied, and scientists are careful not to overstate what these brain patterns fully mean. But the pattern is consistent. The sensitive brain works harder, reaches deeper, and takes longer to settle when the processing is done. Sensory processing sensitivity is heritable. Studies on twins suggest a meaningful genetic component, meaning the trait tends to run in families. But genes alone do not determine how sensitivity expresses itself. The environment a sensitive person grows up in shapes the trait in significant ways. Research has found what scientists call a differential susceptibility effect. Highly sensitive people are more affected by their environments than others, both for better and for worse. A sensitive child raised in a warm, supportive household tends to thrive beyond most of their peers. The same sensitive child raised in a difficult, unstable environment tends to struggle more than others would. This is sometimes called the orchid hypothesis. Most people are dandelions, able to grow almost anywhere. Sensitive people are orchids, requiring more specific conditions to flourish, but capable of extraordinary beauty when those conditions are met. The nervous system of a highly sensitive person operates with what researchers describe as a lower threshold for stimulation. This means that signals reaching the brain, whether from sound, light, emotion, or social interaction, do not need to be especially strong to be noticed. The system is calibrated for subtlety. Where someone with a less sensitive nervous system might tune out background noise at a dinner party, the sensitive brain keeps attending to it, layering it with other signals, integrating it into a growing picture of the environment. This is not a choice. It is not something that can simply be turned off with enough discipline or positive thinking. It is how the nervous system was built. And by the time the evening ends, that system has done the equivalent of a full day's additional processing. The need for sleep, for genuine recovery, becomes something different entirely. Cortisol is a stress hormone released by the adrenal glands during moments of pressure, threat, or overstimulation. For highly sensitive people, cortisol levels rise more easily and tend to stay elevated longer than in less sensitive individuals. Even mild stimulation, a conversation that felt slightly uncomfortable, a room that was slightly too bright, a schedule that felt slightly too full, can trigger a cortisol response that lingers into the evening. When cortisol is elevated at bedtime, the brain struggles to shift into the relaxed states needed for sleep to arrive. The body remains on alert, scanning, processing, anticipating. This is one of the reasons many highly sensitive people describe lying in bed feeling tired but wired, exhausted in body but unable to quiet the mind. The nervous system is not broken. It is simply still doing its job. At the end of a very long day, during wakefulness, especially during a full and stimulating day, the brain accumulates waste products at the cellular level. One of these is a protein fragment called amyloid beta, which has been studied extensively in connection with neurological health. The brain has its own internal cleaning system, sometimes called the glymphatic system, which does its most thorough work during deep sleep. This system uses channels around the brain's blood vessels to flush cerebrospinal fluid through the tissue, clearing accumulated waste and cellular debris. Research has confirmed that glymphatic clearance is significantly enhanced during the slow wave stages of sleep, the deepest and most restorative phases. For a brain that has processed more information, felt more deeply, and worked harder throughout the day, this clearing system may need to work with particular thoroughness. Sleep, in this sense, is not rest. It is a biological process as necessary as breathing. The glymphatic system was only formally described in 2012, and research into how it functions is still unfolding. A foundational study published in the journal Science in 2013 found that the spaces between brain cells expand by roughly 60% during sleep, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow more freely through the tissue and carry waste products out. More recently, a 2025 study published in the journal Cell identified an additional layer of this process. Rhythmic oscillations in a brain chemical called norepinephrine, arising from a region called the locus coeruleus, appear to coordinate the vascular pulsations that drive cerebrospinal fluid into the brain during non-REM sleep. These two findings together suggest a layered system, one that becomes most active precisely when the brain grows still enough to allow it. What the glymphatic system needs, above all else, is the particular quiet of deep sleep. Sleep is not a single state. It is a sequence of cycles, each lasting roughly 90 minutes, repeating through the night. Within each cycle are distinct stages. The earliest stages are lighter sleep, where the brain is transitioning out of wakefulness. Then comes slow wave sleep, also called deep sleep, or N3, where the brain generates long, rolling electrical waves and the glymphatic system does much of its clearing work. Then comes REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, where the brain is highly active, where emotional memories are processed, where the experiences of the day are integrated and filed. For highly sensitive people, both of these stages carry particular significance. Deep sleep repairs and clears. REM sleep processes emotion, and a nervous system that has absorbed more and felt more throughout the day may need more of both to fully recover before morning. The brain during REM sleep behaves in ways that are still not fully understood. The emotional centers of the brain, particularly a region called the amygdala, are highly active during REM. At the same time, a chemical called norepinephrine, which is associated with stress and alertness, drops to its lowest level of the entire day. This combination, high emotional activity paired with very low stress neurochemistry, is thought to allow the brain to revisit emotionally charged experiences without the full weight of reliving them. It is sometimes described as a kind of overnight emotional processing. Difficult memories are revisited in a softer neurochemical environment, gradually losing some of their sharp edges. For a highly sensitive person who has spent the day absorbing not only their own emotions, but the emotions of those around them, this nightly process is not a luxury. It is the repair cycle the nervous system depends on. Empathy, one of the defining qualities of high sensitivity, has a biological cost. Feeling the emotions of others, not just intellectually understanding them, but physically registering them in the body, requires neurological resources. Studies using brain imaging have found that highly sensitive individuals show more activation in regions linked to empathy and awareness of others' internal states when viewing images of people in distress or joy. This deeper empathic response is one of the things that makes sensitive people so valuable in relationships, in caregiving roles, and in creative work. But it also means that a highly sensitive person arriving home after a day of interactions carries something of everyone they met with them. Sleep is partly where those accumulated resonances are sorted, the self separated from the absorbed, the internal distinguished from the received. The body's autonomic nervous system has two primary modes. The sympathetic mode activates the body for action, raising heart rate, sharpening attention, preparing for threat or effort. The parasympathetic mode returns the body to rest, lowering heart rate, slowing breathing, supporting digestion and repair. Many highly sensitive people find that their nervous system tends to spend more time in the sympathetic mode than feels comfortable, not because of any particular threat, but because the depth of processing itself keeps the system engaged. Transitioning into the parasympathetic state can take longer and require more deliberate conditions. Quiet, dim light, familiar textures, low sensory input, slow rhythm. Sleep is the deepest expression of parasympathetic functioning, the place where the body finally completes the return to itself. Not all sleep is equal in its restorative capacity. Sleep that is interrupted, fragmented, or spent primarily in lighter stages provides less glymphatic clearing, less emotional processing, and less neurological repair than deep, uninterrupted sleep. Highly sensitive people are more likely to be woken by environmental stimuli during the night. A distant sound, a change in temperature, a shift in light can pull a sensitive sleeper out of a deeper stage and back into a lighter one. This is not insomnia in the clinical sense. It is a natural consequence of a nervous system that continues to attend to its environment even during sleep. Understanding this helps explain why many sensitive people report waking feeling less restored than the hours they slept might suggest. The duration of sleep matters, but so does its architecture, the quality and completeness of its stages. During the deepest stages of slow-wave sleep, the body engages in substantial physical repair. Growth hormone is released, supporting the regeneration of tissues and cells. The immune system becomes more active. The processes of recovery that could not run at full capacity during the waking hours find space to proceed. Blood pressure drops. Breathing slows. The muscles relax into their deepest resting state. For a highly sensitive person whose body has been carrying higher levels of stress hormones throughout the day, whose immune system may be more reactive to environmental signals, and whose muscles may hold tension from the sustained effort of navigating a stimulating world. This physical repair phase is particularly meaningful. The body uses the night to correct and restore what the day has cost. Sleep is the balance being restored. The hippocampus is a small, curved structure deep in the brain that plays a central role in forming and organizing memories. During wakefulness, new experiences are temporarily stored in the hippocampus, waiting for processing. During sleep, particularly during slow-wave sleep, the hippocampus communicates with the outer layer of the brain, the cortex, transferring memories from temporary storage into longer-term representations. This process is called memory consolidation. For highly sensitive people, who tend to process experiences more deeply and encode more details, the consolidation process may involve a larger volume of material. Every conversation noticed, every emotional tone absorbed, every aesthetic detail registered. All of it becomes part of what the sleeping brain works to organize. This is one of the reasons that a night of good sleep often makes the world feel clearer. Not just more rested, genuinely clearer. Many highly sensitive people describe a particular kind of exhaustion that is different from physical tiredness. It is sometimes called overstimulation, fatigue, or sensory burnout. The body may not feel physically depleted in the way that follows exercise or heavy labor, but the mind feels saturated, as though it has taken in more than it can hold, as though every additional signal, no matter how small, arrives too loudly. This state is recognized in the research on sensory processing sensitivity as a real neurological experience, not a personal failing or weakness. It arises when the processing demands placed on the nervous system exceed its recovery capacity. Sleep, and sometimes sleep alone, provides the kind of reset this exhaustion requires. Not a short rest or a change of environment, though those help, but true sleep, deep and unhurried, the kind that lets the system discharge what it has been carrying. The relationship between high sensitivity and sleep is not simple. Research and clinical observations suggest that many highly sensitive people find it difficult to fall asleep, even when they are deeply tired. The reasons are intertwined. The same tendency toward deep processing that defines the trait continues as the body attempts to rest, generating thoughts, replaying moments, imagining outcomes, attending to sensations in the body and sounds in the environment. Cortisol, if still elevated from the day, keeps the body slightly alert. The transition from wakefulness to sleep requires a quiet that the sensitive mind may find difficult to arrive at on demand. This is why deliberate winding down routines, quiet environments, dimming of light in the hours before sleep, and gentle, unhurried evenings tend to matter more for sensitive people than for others. The conditions of sleep are not separate from the quality of sleep. They are part of it. The body's internal clock, called the circadian rhythm, governs the timing of sleep and wakefulness through changes in light exposure, temperature, and hormone cycles. As evening arrives, the brain begins producing melatonin, a hormone that signals the body to prepare for sleep. For this process to proceed smoothly, the nervous system needs to perceive that the environment is becoming quieter and safer. For a highly sensitive person, signals that work against this perception: bright screens, unresolved emotional tension, noise, or social demands too close to bedtime, can delay or reduce the melatonin signal. Understanding this biology is not a cause for worry. It is an invitation to treat the evening as part of sleep itself. The long, gentle preparation for something the body genuinely needs. Research into the neuroscience of high sensitivity has identified differences in how certain brain networks communicate in highly sensitive people. In one study, published in 2025, researchers used resting state brain imaging with a sample of 62 university students to explore the relationship between sensory processing sensitivity and brain network connectivity. They found that the connection between the salience network, a system involved in detecting what is potentially significant in the environment, and a regulatory network involved in top-down control, appeared somewhat reduced in people with higher sensitivity scores. The researchers framed this not as a flaw, but as a variation that may help explain both the gift of noticing and the difficulty of not noticing. Further research across broader populations will be needed to understand what these findings fully mean. But the direction is consistent with what many sensitive people know from lived experience. The body keeps a kind of debt ledger for stimulation and recovery. Each experience, interaction, sensory input, and emotional exchange adds to what the nervous system must process and discharge. For people with lower sensitivity, the daily balance tends to clear relatively easily. For highly sensitive people, the accumulation is greater, and the discharge takes longer. If the night does not provide enough time and depth for this discharge to complete, the deficit carries forward into the next day, over days and weeks. If sleep is consistently insufficient or poor in quality, the deficit grows. What might begin as vague tiredness and slight emotional fragility can deepen into persistent fatigue, difficulty concentrating, heightened emotional reactivity, and lowered resilience to stress. This is not weakness. It is the biology of a sensitive system running without adequate maintenance. Adrenaline, also called epinephrine, is released alongside cortisol during states of activation and overstimulation. While cortisol operates across a longer time scale, adrenaline works quickly, raising heart rate, sharpening the senses, and preparing the body for immediate response. For highly sensitive people, adrenaline can be triggered by stimuli that would not activate the same response in others. A sudden noise, an unexpected social obligation, a piece of music that carries particular emotional weight. Even pleasant anticipation can trigger enough adrenaline to make sleep difficult to reach. This is one of the reasons that many sensitive people find that even joyful, stimulating days require significant recovery. The nervous system does not always distinguish between pleasant and unpleasant stimulation. What matters is the volume. And for a sensitive system, volume reaches its limit sooner. The concept of differential susceptibility, developed by researchers studying environmental sensitivity, proposes that highly sensitive individuals are not simply more vulnerable to negative conditions. They are more responsive to all conditions. In studies observing children with high sensitivity traits, those raised in warm, nurturing environments showed higher levels of well-being and social competence than their less sensitive peers. The same trait that made them more affected by difficulty also made them more responsive to support, kindness, and stability. Scientists sometimes describe this as being more plastic, more malleable in response to the environment. For a sensitive person lying down to sleep tonight, this means something concrete. A sleep environment carefully shaped for quiet, for warmth, for gentleness, produces more than the same environment would for others. The sensitive system benefits more. Rest yields more return. Brainwave activity changes profoundly across the stages of sleep. During wakefulness, the brain produces fast, low-amplitude waves called beta waves, associated with active thinking. As the body moves towards sleep, these give way to alpha waves, calmer and slower, associated with relaxed awareness. As deeper sleep approaches, theta waves emerge, slower still, characteristic of the threshold between waking and sleep. Then, in deep sleep, come delta waves, the longest and slowest, sweeping across the brain in gentle, rhythmic rolls. These delta waves are the signature of the deepest repair. The glymphatic system runs, hormones release, memories consolidate. The emotional work of REM follows. This electrical cascade from beta to delta is the nervous system doing something no waking state can replicate. And for a highly sensitive brain that has sustained beta wave activity longer and at greater intensity throughout the day, the arrival of delta is not just sleep. It is a return to baseline. Researchers studying sleep have found that even a single night of reduced or disrupted sleep leads to measurable changes in emotional sensitivity. After one poor night, the amygdala, the brain's emotional signal center, becomes more reactive to negative stimuli. The prefrontal cortex, which helps regulate emotional responses and support thoughtful decision-making, shows reduced activity. In a sense, sleep deprivation temporarily shifts the emotional landscape toward greater reactivity in anyone who experiences it. For highly sensitive people, who already begin with a more responsive amygdala and a system that requires more effort to regulate, sleep loss amplifies what is already present. The case for deep, sufficient sleep for sensitive people begins not with preference, it begins with neuroscience. Let's pause here for just a moment. As you breathe out slowly, notice your body. Right now, without any instruction from you, trillions of cells are working in quiet cooperation. Your heart is beating. Your lungs are exchanging gases. Your immune system is assessing and adjusting. Your brain, which has been doing so much today, is already beginning to shift into its slower rhythms. You are a complete, self-repairing ecosystem. You always have been. Every cell in your body knows how to sleep. This state has been repeated across the long story of your species. You are doing the oldest thing a human body knows how to do, and it does not require effort, only permission. Now we continue. Sleep quality and emotional regulation are deeply connected. Studies have found that people who consistently get sufficient high-quality sleep report greater emotional stability, more flexible thinking, and higher resilience to daily stress. For highly sensitive people, whose emotional lives are already richer and more complex, this connection is amplified. Good sleep does not eliminate the depth of feeling that defines high sensitivity, but it provides the neurological foundation from which that depth can be experienced with steadiness rather than overwhelm. The difference between a sensitive person who has slept well and one who has not is not only observable in mood, it can be measured in brain activity, in stress hormone levels, in the speed and completeness of emotional recovery. Sleep is the foundation beneath the foundation. The transition between sleep stages is not always smooth. During lighter sleep phases, particularly in the early part of the night, the brain is more susceptible to being pulled back into wakefulness. For highly sensitive people, whose nervous systems continue to monitor the environment even during sleep, this vulnerability window is meaningful. A door closing in another room, the heating system cycling on, a slight change in room temperature. Any of these signals can interrupt a transition into deeper sleep before it is complete. This is why sleep hygiene recommendations, like maintaining a consistent room temperature, using white noise or soft ambient sound, and keeping the sleep environment as stable as possible, tend to make a measurable difference for sensitive sleepers. The environment is not separate from the sleep. For sensitive people, the environment is part of the sleep. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body, running from the brainstem through the neck, chest, and abdomen. It is the primary communication pathway of the parasympathetic nervous system, transmitting signals that slow the heart, relax the airways, support digestion, and promote the sense of safety and calm. The vagus nerve is also responsive to sensory input, including rhythm, vibration, and sound. This is one reason why slow, rhythmic music, gentle ambient sounds, or the sound of a calm voice can physically shift the nervous system toward rest. For highly sensitive people who register sensory input more fully, these signals may carry particular weight in both directions, amplifying the calming effect of gentle stimulation and the arousing effect of harsh or abrupt sounds. The nervous system reaches towards safety, and sound can lead it there. One of the most consistent findings in research on high sensitivity is that the trait responds strongly to environment quality. In negative, chaotic, or overstimulating environments, sensitive individuals tend to show more distress and poorer sleep than their less sensitive counterparts. But in positive, supportive, and gentle environments, the relationship reverses. Sensitive individuals tend to thrive more fully. This is not equal sensitivity to good and bad. It is heightened responsiveness to all environmental input. A quiet bedroom with soft textures, dim light, and stable temperature is not simply comfortable for a sensitive sleeper. it is neurologically meaningful. It is the environment communicating to the nervous system. You are safe. You do not need to monitor anymore. The system, receiving that message, can finally let go. Throughout the night, the brain cycles through its sleep stages roughly every 90 minutes. Each complete cycle includes light sleep, deep, slow-wave sleep, and a period of REM sleep. In the early part of the night, the deep sleep stages are longer and the REM periods are shorter. As the night progresses, this balance shifts. The later cycles contain less deep sleep and progressively longer REM periods. This means that the emotional processing done by REM sleep happens primarily in the second half of the night. For people who cut their sleep short, waking before completing the natural cycle, this emotional work is left unfinished. The night's filing system stops before the most complex emotional material has been sorted. For highly sensitive people, who often bring more emotionally complex material to bed, this truncated processing may have more pronounced effects the next day. During REM sleep, the brain replays and reorganizes memories of emotional significance. Research has found that this is not a random process. The sleeping brain appears to prioritize experiences that carry emotional weight, returning to them repeatedly across the night's REM periods, each time in the context of the low norepinephrine environment that softens their emotional charge. Scientists sometimes describe this as emotional recalibration. By morning, a difficult experience from the previous day may feel not erased, but somehow lighter, as though the edges have been worn smooth. For highly sensitive people, who tend to carry more of the day's emotional texture with them into the night, this recalibration process is particularly precious. It is the nervous system's natural way of maintaining balance in a life of deep feeling. The concept of emotional granularity describes the ability to identify and name emotions with precision. Research has found that people who can distinguish finely between different emotional states tend to show greater psychological flexibility and resilience. Highly sensitive people often show high emotional granularity, the ability to recognize not just that they feel upset, but whether the feeling is specifically disappointment, or longing, or something closer to grief. This precision comes at a processing cost. More nuanced emotional states require more neural resources to identify, hold, and eventually integrate. Sleep, and particularly REM sleep, is where this emotional granularity finds its resolution. The precisely identified feelings are given context, organized into the larger story of who the person is, and filed in a way that allows them to move forward. Without sufficient REM sleep, this resolution is interrupted at exactly the moment it is most needed. Some researchers have investigated the relationship between sensory processing sensitivity and the tendency toward rumination, the repetitive revisiting of past events or anticipated future concerns. People high in sensitivity tend to show higher rates of reflective processing in general, which, under conditions of stress or insufficient recovery, can shade into ruminative cycles. The mind returns again and again to an experience, not out of dysfunction, but out of the depth of processing that defines the trait. Sleep interrupts this cycle. The sleeping brain is not ruminative. It processes reorganizes, and releases. One of the most concrete gifts that a night of deep sleep gives a highly sensitive person is the interruption of this cycle. The morning brings perspective that the late evening mind cannot reach on its own. Research has found that different people show different biological responses to the same environmental stressors, and that this variation is at least partly explained by the trait of sensory processing sensitivity. In laboratory studies where participants were exposed to mildly stressful stimuli, those with high sensitivity showed larger and more prolonged physiological stress responses, including elevated cortisol and heightened skin conductance, a measure of nervous system arousal. These findings confirm what many sensitive people know from lived experience. The same event that leaves others mildly rattled can take considerably more biological resource to process and discharge. This is not psychological weakness. It is a measurable difference in the body's stress architecture. And it is one of the clearest reasons why the recovery capacity that sleep provides is not equivalent across all nervous systems. For some, more is at stake in a single night. The brain produces a neurochemical called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, often described as a kind of support protein for brain cells. BDNF contributes to the growth of new neurons, the strengthening of connections between existing ones, and the overall health of the brain's architecture. Sleep plays a role in BDNF regulation. Studies have found that disrupted or insufficient sleep is associated with reduced BDNF levels, while recovery sleep helps restore them. For highly sensitive people, whose brains process more deeply and form more connections in response to experience, supporting BDNF levels through adequate sleep may be particularly relevant to maintaining the cognitive and emotional capacities that define their way of moving through the world. Deep sleep is not only clearing the past, it is preparing the brain for the depth of engagement that tomorrow will require. Highly sensitive people often report a phenomenon that some researchers call emotional hangover. Unlike a physical hangover, this does not involve any substance. It is the persistence of emotional and sensory residue from an intense experience or period of overstimulation into the following hours or days. The experience feels like fog or heaviness, a difficulty engaging with new input because the system is still working through the last wave. Sleep, particularly slow wave sleep, appears to help discharge this residue more completely than waking rest alone. The physical immobility of sleep, combined with the specific neurochemical environment of each sleep stage, creates conditions that the resting but awake body cannot replicate. Understanding this helps explain why sleeping after an overstimulating experience often provides more relief than simply lying quietly in a dark room. The sleeping brain is doing something the waking brain cannot do for itself. The skin of a highly sensitive person often carries information about the nervous system's state. Flushing, goosebumps, sensitivity to touch or temperature, the physical sensation of emotional input arriving in the body before it is cognitively registered. All of these are recognized experiences in people with high sensory processing sensitivity. During deep sleep, the sympathetic nervous system's influence on the skin decreases significantly. Blood flow to the extremities changes. The skin temperature rises slightly, which is one of the body's natural signals that deep sleep is approaching. For sensitive people who are accustomed to their skin serving as a signal receiver throughout the day, this shift during sleep is profound. The largest organ of the body finally stops reporting and begins simply resting. It is a kind of peace that has its own particular quality. Research has found that the act of naming an emotion reduces its intensity. When a person identifies and labels what they are feeling, activity in the amygdala decreases, while prefrontal cortex activity increases. This process, called affect labeling, is a natural part of emotional regulation. But for highly sensitive people who encounter dozens of nuanced emotional states throughout a single day, the sheer volume of emotional material requiring this kind of labeling creates a cumulative demand on prefrontal resources. By evening, the regulatory capacity of the prefrontal cortex may be genuinely depleted, making emotional regulation harder precisely when it is most needed. Sleep replenishes these resources. The prefrontal cortex recovers its regulatory strength during the night. The next morning, the sensitive person wakes not only rested, but restored in the very capacity that the day ahead will require most. Many highly sensitive people describe a particularly difficult time of day, often in the late afternoon or evening, when overstimulation reaches its peak and emotional reserves feel most thin. Some researchers call this the accumulated load effect. After a full day of deeper processing, the nervous system is carrying the weight of everything it has taken in, and its capacity to buffer further input is at its lowest. This is precisely the time when many modern lives expect continued engagement. Meetings, family obligations, social interaction, evening entertainment. For a sensitive person, these late-day demands can push the nervous system into a state that makes sleep onset significantly harder. Understanding this dynamic gives the evening a different kind of purpose. Creating even a brief period of low stimulation quiet before the transition to sleep is not indulgence. It is preparation for the rest the body has been waiting for all day. Some estimates suggest that between 15 and 20% of the population carry the trait of sensory processing sensitivity. This means that roughly 1 in 5 people in every family, every workplace, every community processes the world with this level of depth. The trait does not appear to be distributed differently across genders at the biological level, though cultural expectations and socialization may shape how it is expressed. Sensitive people are not rare. They are present in every circle, often contributing the most careful thought, the deepest empathy, and the most thorough attention to what matters. What they need more than validation of their gifts is understanding of what those gifts cost, and what genuine rest returns to them. You're still here, still listening, still somewhere between thinking and resting. That means something. Take one slow breath. Your nervous system is already doing what it knows how to do. Quieting, settling, finding its way toward the stillness it has been working toward all day. We're exploring something that belongs to you tonight, together. And we'll keep going, slowly, gently, all the way to the end. Let's continue. There is a concept in sleep medicine called sleep pressure, the biological drive to sleep that builds throughout the day. It is regulated by the accumulation of a chemical called adenosine in the brain. The longer a person stays awake, the more adenosine builds, and the stronger the pressure to sleep becomes. When sleep finally arrives, adenosine is cleared, and the pressure resets. For highly sensitive people, the daily experience of deeper processing and higher stress hormone activity means the nervous system arrives at bedtime carrying more than just adenosine. It carries the weight of every sound, every feeling, every layer of meaning extracted from the day. Sleep clears more than one kind of accumulation. It clears all of it. Melatonin does not cause sleep directly. It signals the body that darkness has arrived and that the conditions for sleep are present. The actual process of sleep onset depends on multiple overlapping systems, including the reduction of cortisol, the rise of adenosine pressure, the shift in body temperature, and the quieting of the arousal centers in the brainstem. For highly sensitive people, any one of these systems being out of alignment can delay or prevent smooth sleep onset. This is why addressing sleep in a sensitive person requires looking at the entire evening ecology, not just the moment of lying down, the meal eaten 2 hours before bed, the emotional conversation that happened an hour before, the brightness of the lighting at 9 o'clock. Each of these is a part of the sleep that is coming, or the sleep that is being gently invited. The body's temperature regulation during sleep is elegant and underappreciated. As the brain signals sleep onset, core body temperature drops slightly, while the skin temperature of the hands and feet rises as blood is redistributed to the periphery. This heat exchange is part of how the body prepares for deep sleep. Sleeping in an environment that is too warm or too cold can disrupt this process, preventing the temperature shift needed for slow-wave sleep to deepen properly. Highly sensitive people often have strong preferences about sleep temperature, and these are not mere comfort preferences. They are physiologically meaningful. The nervous system that is trying to descend into deep sleep needs its temperature signals to proceed without interference. A room slightly cool, around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, tends to support this process most gently. Dreams are not random noise. During REM sleep, the brain synthesizes fragments of recent experience, older memories, emotional residue, and narrative structure into something that feels lived and real. For highly sensitive people, dreams often carry particular vividness and complexity, reflecting the depth of emotional material the brain is working to process. Recurring dreams, particularly those that involve themes of overwhelm or emotional intensity, may represent the nervous system working through material it has not yet been able to fully discharge during waking life. This is not a sign of something wrong. It is the mind doing its most creative and necessary work. When sleep is deep and sufficient, dreams tend to shift over time, becoming less urgent, more resolved. The change in dream quality can itself be a signal that the nervous system is finally getting what it needs. Research into what is sometimes called positive sensitivity has grown in recent years. The same nervous system that registers difficulty more acutely also registers beauty, kindness, and wonder more fully. Highly sensitive people tend to report stronger responses to art, music, nature, and moments of human connection. Tears in response to a beautiful piece of music, a physical feeling of awe at the sight of something vast or intricate, a sense of being moved by small acts of ordinary kindness. These are not performances. they are the same system that registers pain, registering joy. Sleep serves these positive experiences too. The memories of beauty, of connection, of moments that made the world feel worth inhabiting. These are among the emotional contents that REM sleep preserves and integrates. The sensitive person sleeps not only to recover from the world, they sleep to carry its beauty forward. The immune system and the nervous system communicate constantly. Immune signaling molecules, called cytokines, influence brain function, affecting mood, alertness, and the threshold for discomfort. Conversely, the state of the nervous system influences immune activity. For highly sensitive people, whose nervous systems are more reactive to environmental stresses, this bidirectional communication may mean that periods of chronic overstimulation affect immune function in measurable ways. Research has linked chronic sleep insufficiency to increased markers of inflammation in the body. And for a system that is already more responsive to environmental input, the addition of chronic low-grade inflammation can amplify the very sensitivities that create the sleep challenges in the first place. Sleep is both what the immune system needs to do its repair work and what the nervous system needs to prevent the conditions that affect immune function. The two are inseparable. The hippocampus, in addition to its role in memory consolidation, plays a role in regulating the body's stress response. It communicates directly with the hypothalamus and adrenal glands through the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the system that governs cortisol release. A well-functioning hippocampus helps signal through a feedback loop that a stressor has passed and that cortisol can gradually return to baseline. Research has found that chronic sleep deprivation can impair hippocampal function. When the hippocampus is affected by inadequate sleep, this natural calming signal becomes less effective, and the stress response may linger longer than the situation warrants. For highly sensitive people, who may already have a more reactive HPA axis, the combination of heightened cortisol sensitivity and a sleep-impaired hippocampus creates a compounding challenge. Good sleep is not merely one part of managing a sensitive nervous system. It is structural maintenance of the system that manages everything else. Night is different for a sensitive person. The quiet that comes after the world slows down can feel like relief, but it can also feel like the moment when everything that was set aside during the day rises up for attention. The thoughts, the replayed conversations, the half-processed emotions, the things that felt too large to address while still in motion. This is not a sleep disorder. It is the processing queue, finally running in the absence of other demands. Understanding this shift means something. The evening can be prepared for as a deliberate winding down of input, a reduction of stimulation that gives the cue a chance to shorten before the body needs to sleep. The best preparation for sleep is not simply lying down. It is creating conditions in the hours before that allow the system to begin its descent gradually and gently. One of the most well-documented physiological effects of deep sleep is its role in emotional memory processing. Not all memories are treated equally during sleep. Memories with high emotional significance tend to be prioritized by the sleeping brain. Over successive REM periods, the emotional charge attached to these memories is gradually reduced while the factual content is preserved. In the morning, a person can still recall what happened, but the felt intensity of it has softened. This process requires complete and undisturbed REM cycles to complete properly. When REM sleep is shortened or fragmented, the emotional charge remains attached to the memory without the softening. For sensitive people, this matters enormously. A night of insufficient sleep is not just a tired day. It is a day in which yesterday's emotional weight is carried at full strength. The halfway point in our journey. And this is where we can say, clearly and gently, that what you are doing right now matters. You are not indulging. You are not being passive. You are engaging in the single most restorative biological act available to a nervous system like yours. The research is consistent. Deep sleep, sufficient in duration and quality, does something for the highly sensitive mind that nothing else can replicate. It clears. It repairs. It processes. It recalibrates. It restores the prefrontal regulatory capacity. It softens what needs softening. It strengthens what needs strengthening. Tonight, in this bed, in this quiet, your nervous system is doing exactly what it was built to do. And the only thing it requires from you is this: permission. You have already given it. Let it continue. And here, at the halfway point, let's simply stop for a moment. Notice where you are. Really notice. Your body is here, in this particular position, this particular temperature, this particular weight against the surface beneath you. Every memory you hold most clearly is actually being gently reorganized right now. Your brain is always in the process of filing and refiling what matters. Tonight is part of that process. And right now, in this moment, the most present thing in your body is the slow, steady movement of your breath. There is no deadline on this, no test to pass. You are somewhere between waking and sleep, and both of those places belong to you. Now we continue the journey. Sensory processing sensitivity is not the same as introversion. Though the two traits often overlap, introversion describes where a person tends to direct their energy, inward rather than outward, and where they tend to replenish it, in solitude rather than company. High sensitivity describes the depth and reactivity of processing, regardless of social preference. Studies estimate that roughly 30% of highly sensitive people are actually extroverted in temperament. They draw energy from social connection and may thrive in lively environments, but still process everything more deeply than their non-sensitive companions. For both sensitive introverts and sensitive extroverts, sleep serves a similar purpose. It is the place where the day's processing concludes. The introvert's quiet, the extrovert's stillness. The same biology, the same necessity. The experience of being moved by something beautiful has a neurological signature. Brain imaging studies have observed that when people report feeling chills or goosebumps in response to music, a state sometimes called aesthetic frisson, regions associated with reward, emotion, and auditory processing all activate together. Highly sensitive people report this experience more frequently and more intensely than those with lower sensitivity scores. Some researchers suggest this heightened aesthetic responsiveness is part of the same neural architecture that produces deep empathy and intense emotional reactions. The same openness that makes the world sometimes overwhelming also makes it more luminous. During sleep, these peak experiences are among the memories the brain preserves most carefully. The beautiful things you have felt in your life are not lost to sleep. They are held by it. Research has explored whether highly sensitive people have different sleep patterns compared to less sensitive individuals. The evidence is still accumulating. But what is clear from clinical observation and self-report data is that sensitive people tend to be more easily aroused from sleep, experience more micro-awakenings, and are more affected by environmental sleep disturbances. This is consistent with what we know about the trait. The sensitive nervous system continues to monitor its environment even during sleep, and the threshold for that monitoring to pull awareness back toward waking is lower. Understanding this has practical implications. It suggests that for sensitive sleepers, sleep environment is not a secondary concern. It is a primary variable in the quality and completeness of the night's restoration. The pre-sleep period, sometimes called the hypnagogic state, is the threshold between wakefulness and sleep. During this transitional phase, the brain generates a mix of alpha and theta waves, and imagery can arise spontaneously, often vivid and disconnected from deliberate thought. Many highly sensitive people find this state particularly rich. Ideas surface. Memories arise unbidden. Creative connections form between unrelated concepts. This hypnagogic richness is another expression of the sensitive brain's tendency toward deep, associative processing. It is not a problem to be solved. It is a feature of the transition. The key is to allow it without engaging it too actively, to let the images arrive and drift, without the waking mind taking hold and pulling the process back toward full alertness. Observation without grasping is the natural art of falling asleep for a sensitive mind. Body scan practices, in which attention is gently moved through each part of the body without judgment, have been studied as sleep aids. Research on mindfulness-based approaches to sleep has found that they can help reduce sleep onset latency, the time it takes to fall asleep, particularly in people who experience racing thoughts at bedtime. For highly sensitive people, body scan practices may offer a particular benefit. They redirect the depth of processing inward and downward, toward sensation rather than cognition, toward the body rather than the story. The sensitive mind that tends to run upward, toward thought and analysis, is invited instead to notice warmth, weight, softness, and rhythm. This is not suppression. It is redirection. The processing continues, but now it processes something quiet. The sleep of children who are recognized as highly sensitive shows characteristics that echo what we see in sensitive adults. These children tend to have more difficulty with sleep onset, are more easily disrupted by environmental changes, and often need longer transitional periods between activities and sleep. They may find bedtime difficult, not from defiance, but from the genuine challenge their nervous systems have in making the shift from the stimulation of the day to the quiet required for sleep. Understanding this in children helps explain its continuation into adulthood. The trait does not change. The need it creates does not diminish. A sensitive child who is gently and consistently helped toward rest becomes a sensitive adult who has a relationship with sleep that is not built on struggle. Darkness is a signal. Throughout human evolutionary history, the arrival of true darkness in the environment signaled safety, the end of the day's demands, the time for the body to begin its long work of repair. Light and dark are not merely convenient or inconvenient for the nervous system. They are ancient biological cues with direct effects on hormone production, arousal systems, and the depth of sleep that follows. Modern artificial light, particularly the blue spectrum light of screens, suppresses melatonin production and delays the biological nightfall signal. For highly sensitive people, whose nervous systems respond more fully to environmental cues of all kinds, the impact of evening light exposure may be proportionally stronger. Dimming the environment in the hours before sleep is a communication to the nervous system. The day has ended. The restoration can begin. Sleep scientists have described a quality called sleep reactivity, the degree to which a person's ability to sleep is affected by stress. People with high sleep reactivity are more likely to experience sleep difficulties during periods of stress, not because of any sleep disorder, but because their sleep system is more sensitive to the psychological state they bring to the bedroom. There is meaningful overlap between high sleep reactivity and the trait of sensory processing sensitivity. Both involve a nervous system that responds more completely to its context. For highly sensitive people with high sleep reactivity, the implication is not discouraging. It means that the same responsiveness that complicates sleep under stress also means the sleep system responds well to calming conditions. A careful, consistent sleep environment is not merely comfortable, it is actively therapeutic. Social interactions carry particular weight for many highly sensitive people, even positive ones. The attention to emotional cues, the effort of reading the room, the depth of engagement with what others are feeling and thinking. All of it requires sustained neurological effort. After a long day of interactions, even those that went well, a sensitive person may feel depleted in a way that is hard to explain to others. This is sometimes described as a people hangover, a residue of social engagement that lingers in the body as tension, as mental noise, as a need for space and quiet. Sleep addresses this directly. During sleep, the social processing circuits of the brain are not receiving new input. They are sorting and filing what they received. The following morning, the same person who needed solitude at 10 o'clock at night may wake feeling genuinely present and ready. The reset is real. There is a phenomenon sometimes called emotional contagion, in which the emotional state of one person influences those nearby. Research has found that highly sensitive people show greater responsiveness to emotional contagion, meaning they more readily mirror the emotional states of those around them. This corresponds to measurable differences in how the brain processes social and emotional information. By the end of a day spent in emotionally charged environments, a sensitive person may be carrying emotional material that is not entirely their own. Sleep performs a kind of sorting. During REM, the brain processes emotional content in the context of the self, gradually distinguishing what is genuinely one's own from what was received. This nightly clarification is one of the quiet gifts that sufficient sleep returns to a sensitive person. Waking up feeling more like yourself. Research on sensory processing sensitivity across cultures suggests that the trait exists in every human population that has been studied. The specific stimuli that trigger overstimulation and the social acceptability of the trait's expression vary across cultures. In cultures that value reflection, subtlety, and emotional depth, sensitive traits may be recognized more positively. In cultures that prioritize extroversion and emotional stoicism, the same traits may be more invisible or misunderstood. But the underlying neurobiology is consistent. The genetic and neurological basis of sensory processing sensitivity does not appear to vary meaningfully across populations. This universality suggests that the trait serves a human purpose, not a cultural purpose, not an individual advantage, a species-level function. Sensitive people are part of a system larger than any single life. And tonight, in this quiet, that system is resting. Slow-wave sleep is sometimes called the Great Restorer. During the long, rolling delta waves of deep sleep, the body engages in repair at a cellular level. Cellular maintenance processes become more active. Proteins are synthesized. Inflammatory markers in the body tend to decline. For a nervous system that has been running at higher intensity, in the context of chronic stress, overstimulation, or accumulated emotional weight. This cellular restoration is meaningful beyond the scale of how one feels in the morning. It is the maintenance of the biological foundation. It is the body saying, quietly and without drama, I know what the day cost. I am accounting for it now. Some people find sleep comes more easily with sound, not silence. For many highly sensitive people, complete silence can itself become stimulating. In the absence of external sound, the internal world becomes louder. Tinnitus, or simply the amplification of internal body sounds and mental chatter, can fill the void. Soft, consistent ambient sound, rain, ocean waves, white noise, gentle music, can provide the auditory nervous system with something gentle and predictable to attend to, occupying the monitoring function of the sensitive brain without overwhelming it. This is why videos like this one exist. Not because the mind needs entertainment, but because a gentle stream of calming input gives the over-attending nervous system somewhere to rest its attention, while the body descends into sleep. The sound is a path. The destination is the silence inside it. The concept of allostatic load describes the cumulative biological cost of stress and adaptation over time. Each experience of stress, even mild and momentary, requires the body to mobilize resources, adjust hormone levels, and modify physiological parameters. Most of these adjustments resolve once the stressor has passed. But when stress is frequent and the recovery between stresses is insufficient, residual load accumulates. For highly sensitive people who mobilize a stress response in response to more stimuli, and whose stress responses tend to last longer, the potential for this kind of load to build is greater. Sleep is one of the primary recovery windows that prevents accumulation from becoming chronic. Each night of good sleep reduces the load. Each night of poor sleep allows it to grow. Over years, the difference becomes visible not only in mood and energy, but in inflammatory markers and the body's long-term capacity for repair. We are now more than halfway through our journey. And what is emerging? Across these facts, across the science of a sensitive nervous system and the biology of restorative sleep, is something that deserves to be said clearly. The need for deep sleep is not a weakness of the highly sensitive person. It is a biological requirement of a system that does more. A brain that processes more information each day requires more clearing each night. A nervous system that carries more emotional content requires more processing during REM. A body that operates under higher physiological stress requires more cellular repair. Sleep, for the highly sensitive person, is not more sleep than is reasonable. It is exactly the sleep that the work of the day requires. Tonight, that understanding can rest inside you as you drift. The relationship between sensitivity and creativity has been explored in a number of studies. Highly sensitive people tend to show higher aesthetic appreciation, deeper engagement with art and music, and more frequent experiences of creative insight. Some researchers suggest this connection may be related to the same depth of processing that characterizes the trait more broadly. The sensitive brain forms more associations between disparate pieces of information, notices subtleties that others miss, and processes emotional experience with more nuance. These same qualities support creative thinking. During sleep, and particularly during the hypnagogic state and REM sleep, the brain makes associative leaps that the logical, analytical waking mind might resist. Many creative insights arrive in the morning or just after waking. The residue of the sleeping brain's less constrained processing. Sleep is where the creative mind does some of its most original work. The sensitive brain tends to notice the environment not only through the major senses, but through what might be called micro-perceptions. The quality of light in a room, the emotional atmosphere between people, the subtle change in someone's tone, the particular quality of silence in a place. This continuous layer of environmental reading requires neurological resource, even when nothing specific demands attention. It is the background hum of a sensitive nervous system, the monitoring that never fully stops. During sleep, this monitoring shifts into a different register. It does not disappear entirely, but it is no longer interpretive. It is simply watchful. And as sleep deepens, even the watching quiets. The sensitive mind, usually so full of what it has noticed, finds something that can only be found in the deepest sleep. The relief of not noticing. Just for a while. Just enough. Some research and clinical observation suggests that highly sensitive people may benefit from somewhat longer sleep windows than the general adult recommendation of 7 to 9 hours per night. This does not mean that sensitive people are categorically different in their sleep requirements. But given that their nervous systems carry more daily stimulation load, require more REM processing of emotional content, and show greater biological stress reactivity, providing the body with the conditions for a complete night, including all the late cycle REM periods that do the deepest emotional work, may mean allowing for a somewhat longer window. Waking naturally, without an alarm, and observing what that feels like over time, is one of the most informative experiments a sensitive person can run on their own biology. The body often knows the number. It tends to be honest about it when given the chance. Emotional regulation in waking life draws on neural resources that are directly replenished by sleep. The prefrontal cortex, which enables thoughtful response rather than reactive one, which supports the ability to pause before speaking, to consider before deciding, to stay present under pressure, is among the brain regions most affected by sleep deprivation. For highly sensitive people, who often invest considerable effort in emotional regulation throughout the day, managing the depth of their responses, translating their internal experience into language the world can receive, pacing themselves across social demands. The depletion of these prefrontal resources is experienced acutely. A well-slept, sensitive person has access to the full range of their regulatory capacity. A sleep-deprived, sensitive person is navigating the world's stimulation with less of the equipment they depend on most. The body's inflammatory response has a connection to emotional states that is increasingly well understood. Psychological distress, chronic stress, and social isolation all show measurable effects on inflammatory markers in the blood. For highly sensitive people, who are more physiologically reactive to emotional stressors, this immune-emotional connection may be more pronounced. Sleep helps regulate this relationship. During sleep, anti-inflammatory processes are more active. Specific immune cells involved in tissue repair become more effective, and the regulatory systems that prevent the immune response from overcorrecting are recalibrated. For a sensitive person managing a body that is already more reactive than average to both external and internal stressors, the quieting effect of deep sleep is not abstract. It is felt in the morning in the quality of physical ease. The difference between a body still carrying yesterday and a body that has let it go. Nature immersion has been studied as a regulator of the sensitive nervous system. Research has found that time spent in natural environments, among trees, near water, in open space with natural light, reduces cortisol levels, lowers heart rate, and decreases the subjective experience of stress. For highly sensitive people, this effect appears to be especially pronounced. The sensory environment of nature, compared to the sensory environment of modern-built spaces, carries stimuli that the human nervous system evolved alongside and seems to register as inherently less demanding. In the same way, a sleep environment that approximates the qualities of natural environments, quiet, dark, slightly cool, texturally gentle, creates conditions the sensitive nervous system recognizes as safe. The nervous system that rests most deeply is the one that feels most safe. Safety is not merely psychological. It is registered in the body, in the hormones, in the tissues, in the quality of sleep that follows. There is a quality of attention available to highly sensitive people that is not available to everyone. The capacity to notice subtle shifts in the emotional atmosphere of a conversation, the ability to detect the first sign of someone's discomfort before they have expressed it, the awareness of beauty that others walk past without seeing. These are not small gifts. In relationships, in creative work, in caregiving, in any domain where depth of attention matters, the sensitive person brings something rare. Sleep is what makes these qualities sustainable over a lifetime. A sensitivity exhausted by chronic sleep deficit cannot attend with the same depth. The gifts narrow. The attention thins. Sleep does not only restore. For a sensitive person, Sleep sustains the very thing that makes them who they are. The brain, during slow-wave sleep, generates what are called sleep spindles, brief bursts of oscillatory brain activity associated with the consolidation of memories and the protection of sleep from external interference. Research has found that sleep spindles appear to help the brain screen out sensory signals and maintain sleep continuity. The general mechanism is suggestive for sensitive sleepers. The brain has built-in processes that work to defend its restorative sleep against the very kind of sensory intrusion that highly sensitive people are most susceptible to. Understanding this is a small comfort. The body is always working on behalf of rest. Even while asleep, it is working for its own depth. Across many cultures and across recorded history, there have been roles that seem to have been filled disproportionately by people with sensitive temperaments. Healers, advisors, artists, those who were trusted to notice what others missed, to feel the emotional climate of a community, to process experience at a depth that allowed them to offer something of value to the group. High sensitivity is not an accident of modern psychology. It is ancient, and it carries an ancient relationship with night. Historically, those who processed the world most deeply often found the night hours particularly significant, whether for reflection, for creative work, for the kind of quiet that only arrives after the world has grown still. Tonight, in your own way, you are part of that long tradition. The night has always known what to do with a mind like yours. The answer to the question at the center of this journey is emerging clearly now. Why do highly sensitive people need deeper sleep to heal? Because the depth of engagement with the world that defines this trait creates a proportional depth of need for recovery. The nervous system that processes more requires more clearing. The brain that feels more requires more emotional recalibration. The body that carries higher physiological stress requires more cellular repair. Sleep is not something that happens to a sensitive person. It is the environment in which the sensitive system completes its most necessary work. What comes through the night is not the same person who entered it. It is a person whose neural architecture has been maintained, whose emotional experience has been organized, whose biological systems have been restored. Deeper sleep is not a luxury for a sensitive person. It is the requirement of a life lived at full depth. Almost there, now. Let yourself settle a little deeper. Your heart has beaten more than 2 billion times without a single instruction from you. Right now, without effort, without memory, without decision. Your heart is doing what it has always done. Your body knows how to take care of itself. Sleep doesn't come when you try to sleep. It comes when you stop trying. And this is exactly that moment. The cycles that govern you are older than anything you have learned. They don't need your help, only your permission. Let go of trying. Simply be here. We'll continue with the final facts. Sleep is not a gap between days. It is the completion of each day, the processing, the repair, the filing, the emotional resolution. These are not interruptions to life. They are the mechanism by which life continues to be livable. For a highly sensitive person, this is especially true. The day is not finished until the night has done its work. And the night is not wasted. It is the part of the day that makes the rest of it possible. The brain does not know the difference between remembered suffering and present suffering. A memory held with high emotional charge activates some of the same regions as the original experience. This is why emotional healing takes time. And this is why REM sleep, which gently reduces the charge attached to memories across successive processing cycles, is so meaningful for people who feel everything deeply. Each night of good sleep takes a small amount of the sharpness from what was hard. Over many nights, the change accumulates. There is a particular quality of silence that comes after a sensitive person has truly rested. Not the silence of exhaustion, or of numbness, or of the mind gone flat, but a spacious quiet in which thoughts arise more slowly and settle more easily, in which the senses feel present without being overwhelmed, in which the world seems not less intense, but more navigable. This is the nervous system after restoration. This is what a good night offers, and it is available to you tonight, in the hours ahead. Slow-wave sleep is deepest in the first half of the night. The long delta waves roll through the brain most completely in those early hours, before they begin to shorten in later cycles. This is one of the reasons going to bed at a consistent hour matters more than it might seem. The deep restoration that slow-wave sleep provides is time-dependent. Going to bed significantly later than usual compresses the window for this deepest phase. The body cannot simply make up what it missed later in the night. The architecture of sleep has a logic, and that logic rewards consistency. Sensitive people often develop what might be called an inner dialogue about their sensitivity. The voice that wonders if they are too much. The habit of setting aside their own needs in deference to what the world around them seems to expect. This internal negotiation is itself a form of labor that the sensitive nervous system carries throughout the day. Sleep is one of the few places where this negotiation stops, where there is no one to calibrate for, where the nervous system can simply be, uncurated and unheld. This is part of why genuine sleep is restorative in a way that other forms of rest are not. The brain is roughly 75% water, and even mild dehydration affects the production of neurotransmitters, the speed of neural signaling, and the subjective experience of mood and clarity. The body loses some water during sleep through breathing and temperature regulation. So mild dehydration by morning is a normal part of the night. For a sensitive person whose emotional and sensory experience is already more pronounced, the quality of the neurochemical environment in which that experience occurs matters. Drinking water in the evening, in modest amounts, is one of the simplest forms of preparation for a clearer morning. Among the things that REM sleep is thought to do is help the brain distinguish what is genuinely meaningful from what is peripheral. The consolidation of memory during sleep is selective. What carries emotional significance tends to be preserved more fully. What is routine and unremarkable tends to fade. For highly sensitive people, who register more as significant throughout the day, this selective process may be particularly active. The night is not just sorting what happened. It is making meaning from it. And the meaning it finds is woven into the neural architecture that the person wakes with. Sleep does not only restore the mind. In a quiet way, it builds it. Touch, warmth, and physical containment are signals of safety to the human nervous system. They are among the earliest signals the nervous system learned. from the warmth of being held, from the pressure of close contact, from the physical evidence that someone is near. For sensitive people, who register sensory input more fully, these signals may carry particular weight. A heavy blanket, a warm surface, a gentle, consistent pressure can communicate safety in a way that reaches the nervous system more directly than any thought about safety. The body believes what it feels, and what it feels as it prepares for sleep shapes the quality of sleep that follows. Breathing is the one autonomic process that can be consciously influenced. The rate and depth of the breath directly affect the activity of the vagus nerve and the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system tone. Slowing the breath, particularly extending the exhale, activates the parasympathetic response and helps the body shift toward the state from which sleep can arrive. For highly sensitive people, this is not a trick. It is a biological lever, one that is always available. The breath is the bridge between the waking nervous system and the sleeping one, and it asks for nothing more than to be slowed. What makes the sensitive mind different also makes it rare in the best sense. In any group of people, the sensitive individuals are often the ones who noticed what needed to be said before others found the words, who felt the shift in a room's atmosphere before anyone acknowledged it, who carried the understanding of complexity without being asked to. These are not small things. They are the things that make communities more human, that make relationships more honest, that make the world more bearable for everyone inside it. Sleep is the quiet infrastructure behind this contribution. The maintenance of the person who offers this. The sleeping body is not passive. It is busy in ways that wakefulness prevents. The lymphatic system drains fluid from tissues. The liver processes metabolic waste. The gut lining repairs and regenerates. The adrenal glands rest from their long day of cortisol production. The thyroid adjusts. The muscles receive nutrients and rebuild. All of this happens in the quiet. All of this depends on the same stillness you are moving toward now. The body has an agenda for this night. You do not need to know what it is. You only need to give it the time and the quiet to do its work. There is a moment in the descent towards sleep where the boundary between self and environment begins to soften, where the sensation of the body's edges becomes less distinct, where thought and image begin to merge. This is the hypnagogic state, the threshold. For highly sensitive people, this threshold is often rich with imagery and creative association. It can feel too interesting to pass through, which sometimes delays sleep. The key is not to resist or accelerate it, but to let it be what it is. A transitional space, a corridor, not the destination, but the way there. Whatever arises can simply be witnessed and gently left behind as sleep continues its arrival. In many traditional cultures, the transition from waking to sleeping was marked by specific preparations and rituals that signaled to the body that the mode of existence was changing. Modern life has largely set these rituals aside. For highly sensitive people, who respond more acutely to the conditions of their environment and who need more deliberate preparation for sleep, the absence of ritual may have real consequences. Building even a simple ritual around sleep preparation, a sequence of calming actions done in the same order each night, can help the nervous system recognize and trust that sleep is coming. The body learns from repetition. Consistency is a form of care. The neurons that fire together wire together. This is a simplified version of Hebb's rule, one of the foundational principles of neuroscience. It means that patterns of neural activation, repeated over time, become increasingly efficient and automatic. This applies to sleep patterns as well. A sensitive nervous system that is consistently given the same calming conditions before sleep begins to associate those conditions with safety and descent. The sound of rain, the particular weight of a blanket, the dimness of a particular light. These become neural cues, gradually requiring less effort to trigger the shift towards sleep. Night by night, the path becomes a little easier. The science has been clear for decades that sleep deprivation affects nearly every measurable cognitive function. Attention, working memory, decision-making, reaction time, emotional regulation, creativity, the capacity for empathy. All of these shift with insufficient sleep. For highly sensitive people, whose functioning in all of these domains is both more pronounced and more easily affected, the stakes of sleep insufficiency are proportionally higher, and the gains of genuinely restorative sleep are proportionally greater, more than for many people. For a sensitive person, the quality of each day depends on the quality of the night before it. This is not a burden. It is a map, and the map points here, to this quiet, to this rest. Throughout the night, the body's temperature continues its quiet regulation. Core temperature remains slightly lower than during waking. The skin stays slightly warmer. This temperature gradient is part of the physiological signature of sleep, maintained by the same regulatory systems that govern hormone cycles and neural recovery. If anything disturbs this gradient, an overheated room, a fever, an activation state that keeps the sympathetic nervous system engaged, the quality of sleep shifts. For the sensitive nervous system, temperature is not merely comfort. It is a biological parameter, and it is being managed on your behalf right now, as you lie here, as your body moves through the architecture of the night. Among the many things that heal during sleep is the relationship with time. The waking mind exists in a particular kind of time pressure, shaped by schedules, by memory of the past and anticipation of the future, by the constant awareness of what was and what is coming. In sleep, this pressure largely dissolves. There is no past being regretted in slow-wave sleep. There is no future being anticipated. There is only the present of the biological process, the body doing what it does, the brain completing what it began. For a highly sensitive person whose waking mind often carries the weight of both what was and what might be, this temporal simplicity of deep sleep is its own form of healing. The research on positive sensitivity offers a perspective that is easy to lose in discussions of difficulty. Highly sensitive people are not only more affected by hardship, they are more affected by everything. By the first warm day of spring, by the particular quality of late afternoon light, by the sound of a voice that carries care, by the moment a piece of music finds exactly the right note. These experiences are expressions of the same biological trait, and they are among the reasons the sensitive person is worth protecting, worth resting, worth the careful cultivation of conditions that allow them to wake tomorrow ready to feel all of it again. sleep science is still a young discipline. Many of the most meaningful discoveries about what sleep does for the brain and body have been made in the past 20 years. The glymphatic system was only formally described in 2012. The specific mechanisms driving glymphatic clearance during sleep were identified in detail in research published in 2025. The relationship between sleep architecture and long-term emotional health is still being mapped. What is already known is enough to say. The need is real. The biology is consistent. And what you are doing right now is supported by everything science has so far been able to see. In the quietest hours of the night, between the last REM period and the first light of morning, the brain enters a kind of stillness that has no equivalent in waking life. Not sleep and not waking, but something between. In this pre-dawn quiet, many people experience a particular quality of peace, a sense of having arrived somewhere, a soft clarity that is not yet thought but is no longer purely sleep. For highly sensitive people, this hour is sometimes one of rare grace. The system has completed its work. The accumulation of the day before has been addressed. What remains is simply the body, present and whole, ready to begin again. Healing is not a single event. It is a nightly practice. For the highly sensitive person, it happens in the deep sleep that clears the glymphatic pathways, in the REM cycles that soften yesterday's emotional edges, in the cellular repair that compensates for the biological cost of a more reactive day, in the prefrontal restoration that returns the capacity to respond thoughtfully instead of react reflexively, in the consolidation of memory that turns the raw material of experience into something that can be held and learned from. All of this happens while you are here, in this quiet, in this dark. Fact by gentle fact, the night does its work. The sensitive nervous system is not a malfunction of the human design. It is a feature, one that exists in every human population, across every recorded culture, across many species. One that has persisted because it serves something that the species needs. The deep attention, the early warning, the empathy that builds community, the sensitivity to beauty that makes life worth living. These are not the side effects of a damaged system. They are the outputs of a system doing exactly what it was built to do. And, like any system of precision, it requires careful maintenance, deep rest, consistent recovery, the kind of sleep that is not rushed, not shortened, not treated as an inconvenience, but honored as what it is. As this night continues its work, something is being sorted inside you. The conversations that felt unfinished, the moments that arrived with more weight than you had words for, the beauty that landed somewhere deeper than you could immediately process, the worry that stayed past its usefulness. All of it is being addressed, quietly and without drama, by the sleeping brain that knows exactly what to do with it. You do not need to help. You do not need to direct or monitor or ensure the work is being done correctly. It is being done. It has always been done. The sleeping brain is the most capable version of the brain there is. Give it the night. It will use it well. By now, you may feel the facts beginning to arrive more softly, less sharply defined, more like impressions than propositions. This is how it should be. This is the gradient working. The scientific content of these final facts does not change, but the way they land in you changes, moving from the analytic mind towards something quieter and more receptive. The sensitive brain does not turn off. It simply changes its register, from attending outward to attending inward, from processing the world to processing itself. This is the state from which sleep arrives most naturally, not reached by force, but arrived at, the way all genuine things arrive, when the conditions for it are finally right. And this is the final fact. You are not too much. You have never been too much. You are a nervous system built for depth in a world that sometimes mistakes depth for difficulty. The same architecture that makes your nights more complicated makes your days more vivid. The same sensitivity that means you need more to recover is the sensitivity that makes you feel more, notice more, care more, create more, and love more completely. Sleep, for you, is not a concession to fragility. It is a recognition of what you are, a calibration of something precise, a return to baseline by a system that spends its days doing more than most people ever know. You needed this night. You deserved it. And when morning comes, you will know it. And so, our quiet journey through the science of the highly sensitive mind comes to a gentle close. We began with the neuroscience of a nervous system built for depth, tracing the 4 qualities of sensory processing sensitivity: depth of processing, overstimulation, emotional reactivity, and sensitivity to subtle stimuli, and understanding that each one creates a proportional need for recovery. We traveled through the glymphatic system and its nightly clearing work, through the REM cycles that soften yesterday's emotional edges, through the biology of cortisol and the body's long relationship with repair. We remembered that the same sensitivity that makes the world sometimes overwhelming also makes beauty more vivid, empathy more real, and connection more profound. And we arrived here, at this quiet conclusion. The sensitive person who rests deeply is not choosing rest over living. They are choosing the deepest form of it. High sensitivity reminds us that the world is received differently by different nervous systems, and that difference is not disorder. Much of what makes a sensitive life rich happens in the spaces that the world does not always honor. In the noticing, in the feeling, in the deep and careful attention to what others pass by. By giving yourself this night, you are maintaining the very instrument through which you experience everything that matters to you. That is not indulgence. That is care for something the world needs. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about connection, the thread that runs through every nervous system built like yours, across every culture, every century, every landscape of human life. You are not the only one who has lain awake, feeling more than they could hold. You are not the only one who has needed a night like this one. In every generation, there have been those who felt the world at full volume, who needed the dark and the quiet to complete what the day began. You are part of that long, quiet company. Let your entire being dissolve into the depth that your particular kind of mind has been searching for all day. No more holding. No more attending. No more translating the world into something the world can receive. Just this. Just stillness. Just rest. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left. Only peace. If this gentle journey through the sensitive mind helped you rest, or helped you understand something about yourself that you needed to understand, perhaps share it softly with another sensitive person who might need it tonight. There are more of you out there than the world sometimes lets on. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight, through the science of a nervous system that has been working on your behalf every single day without being asked. You can allow these thoughts of sensitivity and sleep and healing to fade now, like the last sound in a quiet room after the music has stopped, leaving only the calm that was always underneath. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if a gentle, patient gravity has settled around you. Not pulling, only holding. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way restoration does. Not dramatically, not by effort, but simply by the system completing what it began. Into a place where time and weight no longer have any claims on you. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the sensitive world will still be there. Beauty will still be arriving in the places only you would notice. Connection will still be asking to be felt. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul. And remember, the depth that makes your nights more complicated makes your days more real. Good night.